Thank you, Your Honor.
Not guilty of...
I didn't have a voice. I was trapped inside.
The defendant's motion to vacate the judgment of conviction is granted.
A Nevada woman convicted for a 2001 murder and sexual mutilation of a homeless man will be freed from the Clark County Detention Center.
Just think about being locked up for years, knowing you're innocent. Then, one day you're finally set free. The emotions are overwhelming. Shock, joy, anger, disbelief. For innocent convicts, that moment of freedom brings powerful reactions.
John Bunn has been waiting for this moment since 1991.
At this time, the people do move to dismiss the indictment.
Exonerated for murder. It was a beautiful feeling.
I want to say thank you, Your Honor, because it's been 27 years I've been fighting for my life.
Let's start with our first case. John Bunn was a man whose life was forever changed when he was wrongly arrested for murder at just 14 years old. The incident that led to his arrest occurred in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, in 1991. Bunn was accused of shooting and killing off-duty corrections officer Rolando Neischer and attempting to murder another man, Robert Crossan.
One of the correction officers died. The case was worked by the now disgraced NYPD detective, Louis Scarcella. John Bunn was just 14 years old. He was arrested, charged with murder, and convicted. Bunn shared his emotional story with us last May.
I didn't have a voice. I was trapped inside.
17 years in prison. Bunn taught himself how to read. In 2005, he heroically stopped the attempted rape of a prison counselor. 4 years later, he was freed on parole. But Bunn couldn't forget the men he left behind.
These two here, we could just hold out here.
So he started a book drive to help inmates learn how to read.
I hope it will unlock the chains like it did for me.
There was one more chain left to unlock, clearing John Bunn's name. In 2016, his second-degree murder conviction was thrown out. Today, prosecutors finally dismissed the indictment altogether.
On that fateful day, Bunn was hanging out with friends when he was suddenly taken into custody. Despite maintaining his innocence from the start, he was convicted based on questionable witness testimony and a lack of solid evidence. Bunn spent 17 long years in prison, enduring the harsh realities of incarceration, while fighting tirelessly to prove his innocence. After being paroled in 2009, Bunn continued his battle against the wrongful conviction. He sought help from various legal organizations and advocates who believed in his case. His determination paid off when new evidence emerged that pointed to his innocence. A key witness retracted their testimony, admitting police had forced them during the investigation.
Police say the two gunmen forced the officers from their car, shot them, and then stole the car.
They took me down to 77 Precinct. The interrogation was actually led by a rogue detective by the name of Louis Scarcella. And he was threatening me, telling me that I was never coming home if I wouldn't tell him what he wanted to know. He put me in a lineup with grown men. He made me sit down and hold a number up, and a couple minutes later he came back and told me it was my lucky day that I got picked. I woke up the next day thinking it was a dream, that it was like I was gonna be home, that it wasn't real. This is where they say that the correctional officer, was shot and killed.
The case was worked by the now disgraced NYPD detective, Louis Scarcella.
This happened like 4 in the morning. I was in my house sleeping at the time when this happened. The only time I got a chance to speak was before sentencing, and I spoke to the victim's family, and I explained that it's a tragedy if somebody loses their life or get hurt, but I wasn't the one that committed the crime. They wound up sentencing me to 20 years of life. I was a kid, I was a baby.
On a significant day in court, Bunn finally faced the judge who would decide his fate. Judge Joseph A. Zayas presided over the hearing, where Bunn's not guilty plea was submitted. The courtroom was filled with emotion as Bunn listened to the proceedings, reflecting on the years lost and the pain taken.
I want to say thank you, Your Honor, because it's been 27 years I've been fighting for my life.
The judge officially forgave him in a moment that brought tears to his eyes. The courtroom erupted in applause as Bunn embraced his family and supporters who had stood by him throughout this long journey. After 27 years of fighting for justice, John Bunn could finally reclaim his life and move forward with the truth on his side. Wrap up of this case.
Verdict Form B. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Let's start case 2 of Daniel Villegas, a man whose life was drastically altered by a wrongful conviction. In 1993, when he was just 16 years old, Villegas was accused of being involved in a drive-by shooting that killed 2 teenagers in El Paso, Texas. In the incident, known as the Good Friday shooting, he was accused of involvement.
Villegas was back in court today, but his evidentiary hearing was postponed. He has always said he was coerced into confessing to a deadly drive-by shooting he did not commit.
Villegas became a target for police after they conducted intense interrogations of him and his friends. During a lengthy interrogation, he was threatened with violence and pressured to confess. Exhausted and frightened, he signed a confession that contained inconsistencies and did not match the evidence. Despite his immediate rejection, he was charged with capital murder.
Both were reportedly walking alongside 2 other friends in the Northeast when they were approached by a car believed to be driven by a gang. In 1994, the first trial was held, ending in a mistrial. A second trial in 1995 convicted Villegas of capital murder with an automatic life sentence. But after 18 years in prison in 2013, the Texas Court of Appeals ordered a mistrial. In 2014, Villegas was released on bond.
In December 1994, during his first trial, several witnesses rejected their statements against him. However, the jury could not decide, resulting in a hung jury. A second trial in 1997 ended with Villegas being convicted and sentenced to life in prison. He spent nearly 20 years behind bars while maintaining his innocence. Over the years, Villegas fought tirelessly to prove his wrongful conviction. His legal team uncovered new evidence that pointed to other suspects and highlighted issues with his original confession. In 2012, Judge Sam Medrano granted him a new trial after finding that he had received ineffective legal counsel during his first trials.
In 2017, 2 lower courts ruled key evidence of jailhouse recordings from 2011 would not be allowed in the third trial, which is now set for July 9th, 2018.
Well, I think the biggest part of the battle is that we're not really fighting evidence because there's not any evidence that we've seen implicating Daniel. The real fight had been doing the writ and having this case do a do-over, so to speak, and that's where we are right now.
Officer says he talked with the prosecutors on the case today and they don't think this trial will last very long.
Finally, on October 5th, 2018, Villegas faced a jury for the third time. This time, the evidence against him was significantly weaker due to the new findings. When Judge Medrano read the not guilty verdict, emotions burst. Villegas cried, while supporters cheered wildly. After spending 25 years fighting for justice, Daniel Villegas was finally exonerated. It's a wrap-up.
Based on the record made here today, it's okay. The defendant's motion to vacate the judgment of conviction is granted. Sir, you are free to go.
Our third case is about David Ranta's story. Back in 1990, a rabbi named Chaskell Wertzberger was shot and killed during a robbery in Brooklyn. The shooter had tried to steal a car after a failed jewelry heist and ended up shooting the rabbi, who happened to be nearby.
The Ranta case was one of the first ones we started up on.
February 8th, 1990 was a very cold morning here in Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, New York. And what started out as a botched attempted robbery of a jewelry courier ended up with the senseless murder of Rabbi Heskel Wurzburger.
When the robbery went bad, the gunman panicked and picked the first car that had an engine running, which happened to be the rabbi's car, shot him in the head, and then fled.
David Ranta, a man with a troubled past but no connection to the crime, was soon arrested. Witnesses, including a 13-year-old boy, identified Ranta in a police lineup, even though there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. It later came out that the detectives involved in the case may have coached some witnesses to pick Ranta out of the lineup.
Through the course of the investigation, Detective Scarsella was led to two individuals, both of them naming David Ranta as the perpetrator of the crime.
About 6 months after the crime took place, Detective Scarsella arrested him.
David Ranta was convicted of murder. He was sentenced to 37.5 years to life in prison.
When you first look at this case, on its face, it's a very strong murder case, and yet when you peel back all the layers, it kind of falls apart.
One of the major witnesses who placed David Ranta at the scene completely recanted his identification. So this is a major issue.
As I was walking in from the back, somebody told me, oh, it's the guy with the long nose.
He informed me that the detective who was running the lineup essentially told him who to pick. They told him, pick the guy with the big nose. And slowly you start to get really, really worried that there were major problems with the way that this case was handled, and that's a real terrible feeling to have.
In 1991, Ranta was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 37.5 years in prison. He spent the next 23 years of his life behind bars, always insisting he was innocent. His appeals were denied repeatedly, and it seemed like his fate was sealed.
In handcuffs, he again faced a judge, but this time, the conviction for a murder he insists he didn't commit was thrown out.
Mr. Ranta, to say that I'm sorry for what you have endured would be an understatement and grossly inadequate, but I say it to you anyway.
Ranta mouthed thank you to the judge. Overcome with emotion, his family cheered, some cried. His handcuffs were taken off, and the judge made it official.
The defendant's motion to vacate the judgment of conviction is granted.
The judge wiped away tears as Ranta embraced his family that included a daughter who was a baby when he was convicted. With a bag of his belongings slung over his shoulder, he walked out and faced cameras.
I'm overwhelmed. It's interesting, and I would just like to say thank each and every one of you for supporting me today on this.